Thank you, Fern. Thank you, everybody. I'm Aaron Eisler, Head of Automation for Telstra Purple, both globally and domestically. Something that my friends know about me is that I'm actually a really impatient guy. I hate bureaucracy, which might sound strange working at Telstra. I really can't stand standing in queues, and I really hate repetitious, mundane, repeated activities. And what's cool about my gig is I actually get to work with the latest technologies to help you remove repetition out of your businesses. Now, automation really does help to remove a lot of time and waste, and of course it makes things more efficient and faster and cheaper. But really, the point that I'd like to make here today is that they're kind of the hygiene factors. What automation is really about is about enabling new capabilities that simply weren't possible before. Now, we know that when we have an engineer using Ansible, that they're 6,000% faster than a human doing it. But think about tools in other industries that enable them to make things more possible that weren't possible without the tools, like a crane. How could you build a skyscraper without a crane? It wouldn't matter how many workers you sent down there. You couldn't get it done faster. You couldn't get it done at all. You couldn't move the heavy equipment and the building materials and the space available up high into the sky. And that's kind of what automation gives us. It gives us a new capability to develop existing assets and resources to do things that weren't possible before. Now, networking infrastructure automation is relatively new compared to other industries like manufacturing and agriculture, and even the server virtualization, which has been around quite a while now. And so the point here is that the consolidation in that industry hasn't actually occurred yet. There is no silver bullet in the network infrastructure to solve your end-to-end enterprise, particularly in the complex environments that we work in. And so the key here is to pick out what are the workflows that we can work with to actually start to use different tools that can be interchangeably used across your organisation, because you're not going to find one that's going to solve everything at this point in time. And secondly, that automation is disruptive. There's plenty of organisations that are in the business graveyard that have been hit by changes in technology that aren't around today. I mean, think of Blockbuster and what Netflix did to them, or Kodak and Apple, or Borders and Amazon. If you don't think that it can happen to you because you're too big or that you're too well established, the fact of the matter is that automation is now creating a step change in our ability to produce. And finally, I really just want to make the point that despite what you've heard, automation isn't about taking people's roles. It's about transforming them. And I'm going to be talking about how it's actually about getting greater economic value out of your existing resources and assets. It's not about taking their jobs away. By removing the routine tasks and allowing them to focus on higher order problem-solving activities, relationship-based activities, things that a human or robot can't do. Now, I just want to get a bit of a check here in the room. When I talk about robots, who thinks scary, Armageddon, they're going to take all of our jobs? Just a bit of a check in the room. Now, who thinks exciting? They're going to drive me to work, they're going to clean my house, and they're going to look after the kids. All right, a lot of parents in the room. The truth is probably somewhere in between. And although Hollywood's done a pretty good number on us, it might interest you to know that in America, the number of bank tellers since the year 1970 has doubled. And that since the year 2000, actually the number of bank tellers has increased by 100,000. And in that time, there's been the inventions of the automatic teller machine, mobile banking apps. And wouldn't they have removed those roles? Well, what's happened is that they've transformed these roles. They've moved from cash handling, routine type tasks to actually the relationship, the sales, the problem solving. I mean, think of the experience that you get walking in a bank today. I mean, not 10 years ago you would walk in and there'd be a big desk with some bars, and on the other side would be a teller, and you walk in today And there's a concierge and some nice areas to sit with, and they sit with you and they talk through what the offers are that are available. But automation isn't new. I mean, even in the house, you know that there's lots of automation there that's around. It's been there for decades, helping us improve our lives. My mother's a teacher, and she got transferred to England in late 80s, early 90s. Great time to be an Australian in England. We were smashing them in the rugby, smashing them in the cricket. It was fantastic. But the thing that I remember vividly about being there was actually when the electrical substation burnt to the ground and we didn't have any electricity. Not for a day, not for a week, nearly a month. And it wasn't the entertainment that I was missing, as in the radio and the TV. In actual fact, the hot water system was the biggest pain. Luckily, we had a gas hob, and we just remember always having pots of water boiling constantly so that we could bathe and do the dishes and do the clothes. And transporting the water upstairs was just a time-consuming activity on top of having to boil it. In fact, our neighbour was admitted to hospital after they fell over carrying a pot of water to their bath. So it's not even just the convenience, it's the safety. Hot water systems have only been in the house not 100 years. So our grandparents' parents actually had to do this. And what it made clear to me was that actually all of this valuable time that I'd like to use not boiling water, I can use to do other things, whether it be homework, probably not, or football at the time. And if I take that experience further, my mother actually, when booking the trip, had to ring the airline, then she had to ring the hotel and book the room. She had to then rent the car, and that was another phone call. If she did that today, that would all be off one app. You could do it all off a single airline app, and you could book all three, all at once, very easily. And this is with a woman who doesn't know how to operate a VCR. And she can do this, no problem. The organisations aren't any less complex than they were many years ago, 30 years ago now. In fact, I would argue they're much more complex. I know that from a networking perspective they are. And the point I'm making here is that automation has allowed us to bring together discrete businesses, but in other cases it might be discrete lines of business or discrete technology stacks, and abstract out that complexity into a simple service that our customers can use. And for me, that's really what automation is about. You get it cheaper, faster, all those things. It's about actually bringing together different capabilities and resources that were never working together before and presenting it as an easy-to-use service, whether that be internally within your business or directly to the customer. There's been many great disruptors over history, and they've all had the one thing in common, that they've completely disrupted the way we live, the way we work. And the reason why, and the big because, is they've created a step increase in our productivity levels. The wheel enabled us to create a cart that we could pack stuff in and cart it around. The printing press allowed dissemination of information more farther and broader and more quickly. The steam engine allowed us to bring together resources from all over the country into a single place, then manufacture it, then send it back out across the country. And you all, of course, know the impact of the internet and the computer. And automation is just like this. There's going to be now a step increase in the amounts of data that we can take, process, and deliver. And the key part about automation is that it is enabling us, particularly as a networking community, to become invisible. Because we can move the intelligence from our networking people into the process. We can move the intelligence from the people into the process. And as long as we can describe the logic to the automation, we can then provide that as a service in a way that our customers want it and the way that our customers need it. And this is disruptive because this is the way our customers want to consume. They want to consume as a service. They no longer want to be contracted in. They don't want to have to be told that they can't leave. They just want it, consume it, and only pay for it while they consume it. Now, before we get to the how do we create, I just want to talk to the digital strategy that has to really underpin your business. Now, when thinking about digital strategy, typically there's the pre-internet organisations, those organisations that were born before the internet and those after. So Telstra, typical example, that was born well before the internet. But then a typical example of post-internet might be Facebook or Google. And these organisations look at these types of digital strategies very differently. And in Telstra, we have spent enormous amounts of time and effort and money to start to look much more like the way in which Facebook and Amazon do, to digitise the way we work. And so and automation is all about speeding up inputs to outputs. So if you don't get the inputs right, how will the outputs look? So the innovation domain traditionally has been about, well, big bets really, required to be signed off by senior management because there's a big budget involved. It's mainly done on intuition and it's high risk, high reward. Now we're moving into the world of constant experimentation, fast, fluid, quick experimentation. And really the key that you're trying to look at is what is the cost of learning? And so in Purple we do a lot of delivery into very large customers. So we actually have to lab a lot of what we do. And typically for a 6-month project we're probably looking at about a six week time in the lab where we will test for software defects, we'll load test, we'll just make certain that we're not going to create any adverse effects in the environment. Now, we're working on a project right now for an airline where we're actually trying to bring that from 6 weeks to 1 week. So we're reducing the cost of learning from 6 to 1 week. Or put another way, you can do 6 times as much with the same time, effort and money to do more learning. And that's the key way to think about innovation. How do we reduce the cost of learning? Now, secondly, competition. Traditionally, when we would walk in, there'd more than likely be someone that looks like us sitting on the other side of the table competing for the same business. Typically for us, another telco or a system integrator, hiring from the same resource pools, renting buildings in the same area. But now we're moving into a world of asymmetric competition, where there's companies that look nothing like us solving the same customer problems. And what does this mean? Well, it means that you need to use automation to start thinking about the workflows or the services that our customers desire, not about how to use your inherent capabilities to serve up a product that best meets your capabilities. And next is value. It sort of works off the back of competition in that the value used to be defined by the industry that you're in or the technology that you're working on. And now we're moving into a world where actually you can't build barriers to entry to your value proposition. It's about what does the customer want, what is the service that the customer desires. You have to start with what does the customer want and work back to there into a service. The technology that underpins it, the industry that you're working in, has less importance. And I'll talk about more in a moment. And finally, data, and this is probably the most important one, particularly for us. And like what Fern was saying, there's enormous amounts of data now that are being generated every day. But data has traditionally been seen as a transactional byproduct of working with a customer that you would save in a filing cabinet or on your laptop for posterity or auditing purposes. Whereas now we see data as having inherent value in and of itself. Just look at the share market. Facebook, Amazon, Google, they're each worth more by themselves than Exxon Oil. But data is more valuable than oil now. And how are you going to cope with that? And sure, Google and Facebook, they use that data for advertising and that's how they monetize it, but think more holistically. Think about how do you reuse that data to proactively create services for your customers based on their characteristics or their behaviours. How do we use IP to create best practice? And so for us, that's been a big one. So days gone by, network engineer in Brisbane does a project, saves all that work onto their laptop, and then moves on to the next project and typically reuses their own work to then influence the next job. But what we've been working towards is actually how do we collaborate on that data? How do we create best practice? How do we make certain that the good ideas that the network engineer in Brisbane is being reused. Now, I would really encourage you, when you come over to the Purple stand, to talk to Pete McChrystal. Hand up. Matt is a cut snake, but one of the nicest guys you've ever met. Matt is a cut snake because he's really into CrossFit and all these kinds of fad diets. If there's a fad diet that you're interested in, he's done the research, probably on himself. So look for the skinny Pete McChrystal over there if you want to talk about how Telstra Purple is actually working through our digital data process. But back onto that example, like we had a team in Melbourne, and they created this algorithm where they went into this mining company and actually able to run through the entire network an algorithm to predict when there was going to be a routing issue. So now, on that customer, we could actually say, right, not that you have an issue right now, that based on your configurations and what we're seeing, there might be an issue. If there is an outage on hop 3, there might be an issue on hop 6. So that kind of predictive thing. Now, the key here is not that we're creating innovation. We're all always innovating. But how do we make certain that the engineer in Brisbane is getting that into his testing regime? And this is the competitive advantage that you need to start thinking about, and it starts with your digital strategy. That if I can start to create a battery of tests that is being added to by all 600 Purple network engineers, because that's how many we've got, then I can start to create a level of service that my competitors can't. So we've been talking about how great automation is and when you should do it. When shouldn't you do it? And there is a little differentiator between the technology industry and the manufacturing and agriculture, and that is that complexity isn't necessarily a reason not to automate. So Henry Ford classically said, you can have whatever colour you want as long as it's black, right? And that's because and the point he was making was, we don't like variation or variability when we're manufacturing something. But in actual fact, in technology, that's actually a really good reason to start to automate, because you can start to automate the complexity and remove the complexity for your users. And as I said before, don't always think about your users as an external customer. Think of someone as, maybe it's a project manager that needs to use your networking services. It can be as easy as that. And they don't want to have to deal with the networking department. But coming back to this, it's about quantity. Whether it's low complexity or high complexity, that's a good reason to do it. Obviously, if it's low complexity and it's high quantity, that's the absolute sweet spot. But also high quantity and high complexity is also a good reason. So how do you create new capabilities out of your existing? And this is what it's about. It's about creating new capabilities by bringing together traditionally discrete technology domains or traditionally discrete business units to develop new services for your customers. Well, it doesn't start with just scrapping these technology domains and starting anew with standards so that it's all one standard. Because I would argue that quite often the level of complexity that's been built up in your organisations is necessary to work in the complex world that you're dealing in, particularly in the large enterprise. Lots of time, lots of effort, and lots of specialised skill and expertise has gone into developing your environments to the way they are today. So what is it? It's about identifying the services that your customers want and thinking about horizontal supply chains, no longer vertical supply chains. So let me bring into an example. So say you're a project manager and you've got to deal with the IT department all the time and you can't stand it. I'm sure there's a few of you out there. You want to put a server in. And now, today as it stands, you have to talk to the network team, you have to talk to the security team to open up firewalls. You might have to talk to the web application development team. There's a myriad of people that you need to talk to in order to stand this server up to get it to the point where it will work. So that kind of service actually moves across these domains. There's the servers, the security team, there's a network team, there's a myriad of other teams. And this is about identifying what are the touch points that go across those, what's the business logic that's required to automate it, and once you have that user story or that end-to-end workflow, bang, that's the service. Now the service might be the server, it might be a VLAN that needs to be added, it might even be pushing out an entire site, but that's a service. And that's what you need to be driving towards, not standardising the environment necessarily, although please don't walk away from here thinking that I'm telling you not to standardise. Now, to give you, if you're at the cafe and you're trying to pay for your meal, or that you want to split the bill with your friends, the interaction with your mobile banking app is a relatively good and simple one. The bank that I'm with is fantastic. And so that simple interaction actually is on top of very complicated systems underneath. And so even in that interaction, the end user service is the is the use case. And so it's the point of actually trying to work out what are the different business units, whether they be the marketing and accounting and finance, or if it be the technological domains as here, the network security and the server, and bringing that all together as a simplified service where the complexity is brought out. And finally, think about building your environments in a modular fashion. Now, the reason I've used Lego blocks here is because I loved Lego blocks as a kid. Absolutely loved it. I had as much Lego as any small kid could afford. And I used to go and play with it. And I'd build a car on the first day, and I might come back the next day and build and add wings, and then I'd have a spaceship. And let's face it, as a 10-year-old kid, I probably had lots of cannons and lasers and all that kind of stuff. But the point here is that I could come back the next day and then add something else to it. And building your networks is a bit similar in the fact that you need to build it in a way like Lego that you can build on top of it. That these Lego blocks are effectively, the little knobs are a bit like APIs. That is the way in which we interact and make certain that it's all standardised across the top. And the second point is that it's about having Lego blocks that are reusable to build something completely different. So maybe I want to come back and destroy the spaceship to create a space station. And I can reuse all those little blocks. And people come to me and they say, well, I work in mining, so a mine looks completely different to the supermarket or to the banking branch. But the truth is, at a networking level, at a network automation level, it doesn't. It doesn't look any different. When I'm automating the pushing out of a router or a switch or an access point, I don't care if it's going into a supermarket or it's going into a mine. That's the job of the designer. They give me a config file that sits in a folder that I point at. So I go and point at that, and I grab that config file and I put it on the router. And whether that router is inside of a supermarket or a branch, a bank branch. And so what I am then starting to build there in terms of my automation is little Lego blocks, because I've got my router Lego block and I've got my access point. And from my point of view as well as Purple, we're actually looking at separating out the sensitive configs, which are the customers that they don't want me sharing, versus the Telstra IP of automation that they do want to have best practice of. So I'm splitting out Telstra sensitive information from the Lego blocks that I'm trying to create that I can use as far and as wide in the business as I can. And so please think about building your network automation as building blocks. So where will you be 5 years from now? Where were you 5 years ago? Certainly not talking about network automation in the way that we're talking about today. Customers are now starting to expect services as a service. They don't want to be contracted in. They want it as and when they can get it, and they're creating more data than ever before. In 2010, there was 1 zettabyte of data on the public cloud, saved on the public cloud. 1 zettabyte equaling 1 trillion gigabytes. 2019, we've got 33 zettabytes of data sitting on public cloud. Fast forward to 2025, and we're expecting 175 zettabytes of data to be sitting on the public cloud. There is a deluge of data that's coming our way, that's been created by IoT, that's been created by the consumers and certainly created by our customers, that you simply cannot handle with humans alone. This is not a problem that we can solve with humans. Customers want more, they want it always on, they want it as they want it, and they want you to be able to process and handle and curate and develop their data in a way that is always on and consistent. We really want to work with you at Purple to help you transform your business, to develop your competitive advantage, to develop your capabilities into the services that you need to provide for your customers. We've got a bunch of capable people over at the stand, and we'd really like to work with you. So I hope you really enjoy the rest of your time at Vantage, and I'll welcome Fern back onto the stage. Thank you very much.